What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. They are in the midst of their Toys for Tots drive with a whole bunch of good prizes. If you drop off a toy, you get a raffle ticket for every toy you drop off. There's a multitude of prizes. I'm going to go in depth with that later when I do their read and getting some details on that. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Find me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. In this edition of Disguise Coverage, live at 7 p.m. Eastern instead of our normal 9 p.m. Eastern, I am joined by one of my favorite guests to talk about the Bills from a high-level perspective, as this episode is, kind of within the backdrop of the Bills playing the Patriots this week and the Patriots seemingly being ahead of the Buffalo Bills this year. Well, not seemingly, they are. And what does that mean? Are we reading into it too much, looking at it from a small scale, immediate point of view towards a bigger landscape view for the AFC East, for Drake Maye, for the Pats, for the Bills, the AFC landscape for the conference as a whole this year, kind of looking at things from a high level perspective, but as always with a schematic and structural X's and O's type of perspective, as you have come to expect here on this show. And yeah, we're rocking at 7 tonight because I had to accommodate my guest because he's selfish. His girlfriend's been working a ton, and he's like, "Oh, I'm supposed to take her out." And it's just typical selfish, really me type of stuff from this guy. But, my hands were tied and I wanted him on the show. So we moved the show up to accommodate our guest, who, all jokes aside, is sincerely one of my favorite people. I talk about it every time I talk to you, Taylor, or I talk about you. I love having people on the beat for teams that actually know football, know X's and O's, how the game works from an individual roles, responsibility standpoint, a high-level scheme and structure standpoint. And I sincerely don't think there's really anyone better than you in that regard on the beat. Cover the Patriots tremendously. You provide a ton of in-depth detail and notes. Mike Vrabel knows of you because of your schematic and structural comments and what you give him and bring to him. You're also a tremendous person on top of it. So thank you very much for taking the time to join me. Welcome as always. How you doing?
I'm doing well, brother. Thank you. Best intros in the game, as always, and appreciate you accommodating this selfish boy.
Selfish.
As always, I'm very happy to be here and always love talking ball with you and getting some more insights, because I learned just as much coming on these shows or probably more than what I'm able to provide you. So I'm excited about it.
Oh, yeah. And that goes right back at you. You're one of my favorite people to talk ball with. We've texted about football. We've spoken on the phone about football. We spoke on the phone at length the week of Bills Patriots earlier this year. We were talking about McDaniels.
He's the one with the S. Mm-hmm.
It always throws me. All of my notes I've been talking about the Patriots offense, and so I'm like McDaniel''S offense, and so that's in my head too, along with Mike McDaniel from Miami. It's always thrown for me. But yeah, we several moons ago were talking about the changes for this Pats offense and what he's meant to Drake Maye's development and where the Bills were struggling, and lo and behold, going to that game, Patriots pull out the victory. They have continued to ride hot since then, and they sit atop the AFC East, sit tied with the Broncos, from a loss column perspective, and tops of the AFC. As we sit here going into what is a big game, I think, for both teams, and, the Bills making that push for the playoffs, maybe making a push for the division, but the Patriots trying to continue to solidify themselves in this year. Before we get into kind of the meat of the episode, where are the Patriots at right now for you? As a team, are you buying completely into the record? Is there some more stuff under the surface? Is there something under the surface positively that we might not be seeing from the outside? Where is this Pats team at in your estimation?
I do think it's fair to acknowledge their strength of schedule, especially when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. I think the offense, when they had a stretch where they faced the Browns, the Falcons, they played some good defenses. Obviously, the Bills, even if they're not necessarily the most talented, still structurally sound, well-coached defense. And we've seen them do pretty well. So I still think this is a huge test for the Patriots. So I think it'll answer some questions, but what's impressed me most, I think, about this team and why I think they are legit, even though they haven't faced a ton of high-powered offenses outside of the Bills, and to a degree, the Buccaneers. That was kind of right before I feel like Baker hit this, landslide that he's on right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the resilience that I've seen from this team is what makes it feel a lot different from any team that I've seen them have since they were winning Super Bowls. And even 2021, Mac Jones' rookie season, where they had this win streak and they were riding high before they hit their bye week, before everything kind of fell off a cliff. But I remember it was the Bills game in Buffalo where Mac Jones threw, he had, I think, more rushing yards than he even had, pass. It was something crazy like that.
Yeah, he threw the ball four times.
Exactly. And it was just, we're going to run a college offense. We're basically Georgia Tech. And that was my biggest moment for pause, where I said, okay, this may be a Fugazi offense. And I think the defense was good, but at that point, they just had so many injuries, it kind of bottomed out for them. But also in the years since then, I feel like there's a resilience that they've lacked, where they constantly are in games and find ways to lose and just throw up on themselves where they're in advantageous situations, and then everything goes downhill. This team has had several excuses to regress, to fall off for a couple games. I know the Saints game after the Bills game was the first one people really focused on, where, okay, now you're coming off this huge emotional win, and now you're going to play the Saints, who aren't the best team, but they are talented, and, there's something there. So maybe, you slip up there. Nope, they dominate the Saints to a degree. The Saints are still pretty good. Spencer Rattler moved the ball, but they really did what they needed to do. And then in their last game against the Giants, this is a team that is banged up. They had played 12 straight games at that point. And you're saying, hey, if they lose this one, the Giants aren't great, but I at least understand. Nope. They have maybe their most physical game of the entire season and really take it to that New York team. And that's really the biggest thing that stood out, is that I think they are mentally tough. I think that Mike Vrabel has true buy-in, which, what exactly does that mean? These guys are in the building. They are locked in. They enjoy being with each other. You've got position groups hanging out with each other, which isn't a very common thing. You might think, oh, it's a football team, everybody hangs out. Not really. And as someone who's been on the beat for, only 3 years now at this point, really more like 2.5-ish. But in the past couple of years, you didn't really see that. And now you see specialists with defensive players, offensive linemen hanging out with cornerbacks. It's dogs and chickens living together, and whatever the saying is. But you can tell they really do want to play for each other. And I think that comes out in some of the toughest moments when their backs are against the wall. So kind of a little bit of a rant there. But considering what I've seen since I got to the beat, where it's a lot of toxicity and, just constantly falling short of whatever expectations they had set previously, it feels like this regime is finally building those back up and turning them into a legitimate contender, even in year one, when they still have some holes they could probably be filling.
Yeah. And, with what McDaniels is able to do offensively from a schematic standpoint, and then Vrabel is kind of like your ship runner from a culture standpoint, let alone a team preparation standpoint. It just seemed like such a good mix for them coming in. And, even to kind of that tune of where you're talking about the dogs and chickens aspect, maybe a couple weeks ago, I think I'm remembering correctly, I think Carlton Davis was talking about during camp or preseason or something, or maybe even earlier, everybody's at lunch and Vrabel coming in. Vrabel came into the cafeteria and everybody kind of got tight or was quiet a little bit. And he's just encouraged more of comfortability and that culture piece. And now you've got guys who are just feeling comfortable. They don't feel there's no tightness. There's no feeling like they have to be completely buttoned up. Everybody can be themselves. Davis was kind of getting at and crediting Vrabel to that degree. And if you're a Bills fan, you should hate that. Because that's absolutely terrible news to hear. But yeah, kudos to the Pats for all those who cover them. Also, I did pull up that game, that stupid, super cold game that the Patriots won 14-10 in 2021. Mac Jones was 2 of 3 for 19 yards. He had 5 carries, and Damian Harris had 10 carries. Ramondre Stevenson had 24. They came in and ran the ball 46 times and passed it twice, 3 attempts to completions out of.
They didn't want Mac throwing into the wind, which is just for a Patriots quarterback. I remember thinking this is doomed. This is really, really bad.
Yeah, everybody kind of thought that too. And then Damian Harris had a 64-yard tutty, and the Bills offense couldn't put things together. A couple really ugly Mac Jones-led losses for the Bills. There's that one, and then the one in New England, 2 years ago, I think.
That was my first season on the beat.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that loss sucked. The Bills came back and took the lead at the end, and then Mac drove them right down. They had the bit of a referee assist on that one, but on that drive. But yeah, those stupid Stupid Mac Jones losses. So yeah, if you like the Patriots, you're feeling good right now, for better or for worse. I will say I was surprised a bit. I know the whole strength of schedule thing, but DVOA is something that kind of takes strength of opponent into consideration along with a multitude of other contextual factors. Like, they really got penalized in that regard. Like, their defense is kind of bottom, like mid to like high 20s in a lot of regards. But if you're looking at them from like EPA per play, EPA per rush, and all these other things, they're like top 10, 11, 12, middle of the pack at worst. But DVOA, that strength of schedule or strength of opponent, I should say, really kind of knocking them down. And so it'll be interesting to see. Again, they get this second matchup with the Bills, and that'll lead us kind of into our first topic, here. As we stand right now, the Patriots being 2 ahead of the Bills in the loss column, seemingly having somewhat of a stranglehold on the AFC East this year. If they do beat the Bills in this week, and obviously that would mean the Bills lose, the division is essentially done and dusted, and it goes to the Patriots. In a year where, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I think this ties into the whole conversation, like, being a bit ahead of schedule, like Drake Maye in year 2, and McDaniels coming back, and Vrabel in his first year. But this was a roster that, I think people largely were kind of overlooking, even the kind of the impact Vrabel could have. I know preseason, it was really like, oh man, like how much are the Dolphins going to finish second versus the rest of the AFC East? And I remember getting yelled at by people because I was like, I think the Patriots are actually going to finish second. And I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back, but I was like, I think the Patriots could finish second and push for a playoff spot. I saw the schedule. I just have faith in Vrabel, McDaniels, some of the pieces they had, and I thought it could fit and work a little bit, especially depending on what you got from Drake Maye. But lo and behold, we're having this, opening segment of the, changing of the guard in the AFC East, because this has been the Bills division for the past 5 years. Now the Patriots have kind of announced themselves. Is this, season where we're at, what we're seeing right now, is this, a signaling of a changing of the guard in the AFC East? Is this like, yes, the Pats have arrived. They're on even footing and even terms with the Bills, and we're going to start to see that change? Or is it more circumstantial? And if it is more circumstantial and not a true changing of the guard, what do you need to see from the Patriots or for the Patriots for it to be, a true changing of the guard in this division?
So it's still only been one season, and I want to be very clear that things can change so quickly in the NFL, as we literally saw from the Patriots, but in a positive way. Things change very, very quickly. Yeah. That said, I think they have the pieces in place to be a problem for a while in this division. And like you, I was very optimistic about what they could be this season. I had them with 13, I phrased it as winnable games. When I did my initial schedule prediction, I looked through and I had them with 13 wins initially. Now, I kind of put a caveat at the end saying 11 is probably more realistic. But I also think that if they won 13, it's not the craziest thing in the world, because a lot of people were pointing out, they're still going to lose a couple of games that they should probably win. And it's like, okay, but they could also win some games that you'd probably think they'd lose, where that turned into winning, beating the Bills on the road, beating the Buccaneers on the road. Those were 2 games I really didn't have them winning. And then they lose to the Raiders in the opener, which was a game I had them win.
I was going to say, the 2 losses are the opener against the Raiders and the game where they threw up all over themselves offensively against the Steelers. Like even the Raiders game, they still came. They realistically could be undefeated at this point very easily with just 1 loss, considering just the Steelers game. Like, it's wild, like how their 2 losses are like, those are games they should have won.
Exactly. And the reason I felt that they could actually come out on top in so many of those games was because of the infrastructure they now have in place, where you have Mike Vrabel, who had been a head coach of the year. Everyone points out how badly things went towards the end, but I feel like it's really whistling past the graveyard whenever someone doesn't acknowledge that they traded A.J. Brown in a move that pissed Vrabel off so much. While on a live feed, he decided to get up and leave the room leave the war room. So that was a really big thing for me. I understand things weren't perfect, but it also felt like while Vrabel had his warts, there was a lot towards the end of his tenure in Tennessee that worked against him, despite the fact that he had done so much despite not having a ton of pieces. And then you pair a potentially great head coach and someone who at least had a track record in this league with Drake Maye, who already had exceeded expectations as a rookie. And then you add Josh McDaniels to that mix, where another guy who gets criticism because of what he's done outside of the Patriots building, but at the same time has also had a track record of success when Brady did go down. You had the Cam Newton season. You had the year that Brady got suspended where he takes Jacoby Brissett and Jimmy Garoppolo in his winning games he probably shouldn't have on paper, at least a big reason they did. So that was the Rolodex of information he has, where you think of Josh as the play caller and, the quarterback developer, which he is, but also think of how many opponents and coordinators and defenses he's faced and has just whole game plans. Yeah. And like the blueprint for how to solve all these problems, and then being able to translate that to Drake Maye, who's a very cerebral guy. So I do think that while, I still think the Bills are going to be in it. You have Josh Allen. I think there's going to be a lot of butting heads in this division. And hell, even the Dolphins. I mean, what they've been doing recently is pretty impressive, the turnaround that we've seen from them. But having that big three of Vrabel, Maye, and McDaniels, plus the front office, did a pretty damn good job and is a huge reason they've taken this leap. They knocked it out of the park in free agency. Pretty much everyone they spent money on has been a key contributor. And you've got yourself 5 or 6 starters out of just this draft class in the first year that this whole regime was together. So you put that together, if they're able to have this kind of consistency and just improve and not take dramatic steps back, I don't see how you don't continue to look at this as one of the best teams in the AFC, again, as long as there are no significant setbacks moving forward.
I think that's super fair. This year for the Patriots has, even if you are not taking them seriously for what their win-loss record is or where their seeding is in the playoffs, even if they get bounced in the first round or second round, if they end up getting the 1 seed, whatever it is, this has still just been such a successful year for them with where they were coming from, which was kind of like, I don't want to say laughing stock, but I feel like people wanted to push it there because of how much most people hate the Patriots at this point. But how the Belichick run ended, and then the Mayo regime and what that looked like or didn't look like, kind of coming out of there, the draft classes and the lack of like building through the roster, like the leadership, everything. And again, I remember talking about during the offseason, I was like, oh, like Vrabel, you hit on the head. I was like, Vrabel's a good coach. Like he got a raw deal at Tennessee. They shipped out a whole bunch of important pieces. I love that you mentioned the draft night. Like he's sitting there on draft night and they're like, oh, the Tennessee Titans have traded AJ Brown. And he was like, I'm sorry? Like what? And then gets up. I remember him walking. You literally see him get up in the war room and he's like you could see him have to compose himself because he's pissed. And then they like, yeah, he's super pissed. It's crazy. And then they're like, it's the whole like, oh yeah, well, like we drafted Treylon Burks. Like AJ Brown is AJ Brown, but like Treylon Burks could be anything. He could even be AJ Brown. And it's like, why don't you keep AJ Brown?
Or he could be Treylon Burks.
Yeah, or he could be Treylon Burks and not turn into anything, which is no disrespect. It's kind of what's happened. And he gets a raw deal, gets shipped out, takes his time, sits in, when bides his time and waits a little bit. And then he comes in and brings back McDaniels, who has such a great feel for the organization, for this offense. And then you pair that with the quarterback. Yeah, I think even if I'm not ready to say it's a changing of the guard, completely like, the Pats are back, the Bills are down, and it's over. This AFC East is going to be a battle, or even kind of leaning it or skewing it more towards the Pats. But however you look at it, this is a tremendous year one in the Vrabel like building going forward, let alone with what you've seen from Drake Maye, which obviously, kind of we're going to talk through more as we go forward here. And this is even saying too, like they still got some money they can spend. They can get some free agents this offseason. You can build more with like, they have clear spots where they can get better, where it's not like, oh my God, we've got these 7 things. Which one do we spend a first round pick on? It's like, no, we've only got like a handful, so we can let the board come to us, let alone with what we can buttress this team with in free agency. And, you got guys at the helm who you feel confident, buying those groceries and then being able to take them and develop them or put them in the best spots for success. So, yeah, I'm not ready to say full on changing the guard similar to you, but I think you can't see this and not be happy if you're a Patriots fan and not be like, uh-oh, if you are not a Patriots fan or anyone else kind of in the AFC East. Pivoting to the next question, kind of segment we have within here. So we're talking about this Patriots team, talking about potential changing of the guard, not only this year, but going forward. And even a kind of you speaking, in that segment, one of the first things you mentioned was, you can't count the Bills out. They still have Josh Allen. I feel like so much of the conversation around the Bills, and rightfully so, and or understandably so, is like, oh, well, the Bills have Josh Allen and Josh Allen and Josh Allen. aside from Josh Allen, we've talked about this before, over the years as we've had, we talked about it on shows, we've talked about it offline. From your perspective, an enemy's eyes, an in-division enemy that sees the Bills twice a year, how much are the Bills feared from an outsider perspective, aside from Josh Allen? When you come into these games that again, one of the things I love about you, you're breaking down Pat's tape, but you're breaking down league-wide stuff, especially from an opponent perspective as you come into games. When you were watching the Bills, how much of it is, oh man, Josh Allen, or is it also this guy or also this position group? For you, is it really just Josh Allen as this front man and whatever happens behind him? Or do you think there is some fear for other players or other position groups or other aspects of this team aside from Josh Allen?
The biggest one is the offensive line. And that's kind of been driving me crazy as I'm preparing for this game, because when you looked at last time these teams met, Patriots had a really tough time getting pressure. Like all of Josh Allen's explosive passes were at least 3.5 seconds, I'm pretty sure. I think 3 were 4 seconds or more. And I don't really know how you fix that, because I'm poured over the tape. I'm saying if you can tell me, please, because I don't really know how you generate any consistent pressure against these guys unless you have Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson on the edges. Other than that, I don't really know what you're supposed to do. So the fact that, one, as good as Josh Allen is, it's very hard to even disrupt him naturally. And then by extension, also, these are some big MFers who can move a whole lot of people. And then by extension, it makes James Cook even scarier. Now, granted, if you get, Cook in space on mesh or catch him in the flat and he's able to make somebody miss, that's terrifying, because James Cook in space is very scary. But it's the fact that the offensive line is so good in both phases and forces you to respect the run on those early downs when they've got Josh Allen in the backfield, that every time these teams play really kind of grinds my gears. Is that you can't really cheat. There's not a whole lot you can do to say, you know what, I don't care. We're going to load the box and we're just going to run, because then Josh can have success. And if you decide you want to live in too high, they're going to run the ball down your throat. That's a decision you can make, but with an explosive back like James Cook, that's a pretty big risk. Now, Patriots did a very good job of that the last time these two faced. James Cook didn't have any explosive carries, but I also think the Patriots' run defense has taken a bit of a step back, partially because of personnel, maybe also just because they played so many games, their bodies wore down. I'm not really sure. But the run game this time around is definitely something I'm concerned about. So the offensive line, and then by extension as well, James Cook. And on the other side of the ball, it's really just how opportunistic the Bills are on defense. I never really go into games afraid of that unit, especially in recent years. I think when, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer were really in their heyday, and obviously you had more pieces, and Matt Milano is healthy, and, the prime of this Bills defense in the Sean McDermott era, there was a level of fear because they could throw so many disguises at you. They were so smart. You don't have that now, but you still have guys like, obviously led by the defensive front. Those guys are going to create turnovers and turnover opportunities. And then the guys on the back end, more often than not, are going to be able to take advantage versus, being a unit that can almost get there, but then doesn't capitalize and drops picks. Like Christian Benford, amazing play last week to recognize that they were trying to throw at him hot on a little screen and just jump that and decide to take it all the way back for a touchdown. So the offensive line gives me nightmares every time these teams play. In the defense, it's more of a healthy respect, because you know that there's a good chance they're going to force at least one turnover. Last time they played, it was Ramondre Stevenson. Now, the Patriots have had much better ball security from their backs since then, which is notable. But even still, I'm just hoping that the Patriots are smart and do not shoot themselves in the foot by coughing it up, especially in a big moment.
I think that's very well said. How this Bills team is built, and even now, but even going forward in the future. And I have a couple follow-up points to that, but I don't want to violate rules of the show. Whenever we get a super chat, we have to stop what we're doing and bring up that super chat. Carl, you are here pretty much as always. Thank you for being here, especially with this updated time going a couple hours early. And thank you very much for the super chat. And Taylor, I'm going to kind of let you lead this one off. Carl says, since the Patriots play a lot of nickel defense, do you see another Bills tight end game attacking them with their heavies, utilizing 12 personnel and 13 personnel? Taylor, if you were the Bills, would this kind of be how you would lead your attack from a personnel standpoint and or kind of area of vulnerability to attack?
I absolutely would. I think the Bills should live in heavier personnel groupings as much as possible. Now, I will say Marcus Jones, their nickel corner, is a huge reason they play so much nickel versus what they used to do.
Can I say really quick, I loved, it wasn't just the return stuff. He was one of my favorite players in that class coming out of Houston. And everybody, like, anytime I would post a good clip, I'd be like, here's, Marcus Jones interception. Here's a Marcus Jones tackle. Everybody and their mother was like, he's too small. He'll never succeed in the NFL. And then he did some return stuff. And it was still like, people remember that I liked him. And they're like, don't get too excited. Like, he's not going to be. I hate that he plays for the Pats. I love that he's finding success as an actual real defensive back, like tackling, making plays on the ball. He's sounding coverage. Like, he was such an awesome athlete and playmaker. And he was just so fun to watch in that Houston defense. And he's one of my favorite players on their team. I think it's so awesome to see what he's done, considering the size limitations that everyone seemed to put on him and label him with. So I love that you're just kind of leading with that. I'm sorry, I didn't want to steal your thunder.
No, it's good. And really, he hasn't had a chance to thrive really because of the personnel around him. Like, his first year, they had a ton of injuries. So the Patriots are basically forced to play him outside and then play a lot of zone by extension, because he is smaller. And you see that at times, especially as much man as the Patriots played under Belichick and even under Mayo, because he was forced to play outside a decent amount, it just led to some matchups that weren't great for him. The guy's 5'8", at the end of the day.
He is small. He is small. Yeah. Those size concerns were fair. Like, he's small.
Like, there was a matchup against Garrett Wilson, who's not the biggest guy, but he's big enough and he catches everything. So those are situations you don't really want to see. But now the Patriots are actually letting him stay in the slot. They're playing a lot more zone. That's allowed his playmaking instincts to really take over. As Bills fans know, intercepted Josh Allen from kind of a match zone coverage over the middle of the field, and even had a pick six against Joe Flacco. Like, he's really turned it on. And he's also great against the run. And that's one thing. Mike Vrabel joked that he has to tell Marcus Jones, like, hey, man, you don't have to take on pulling guards. Like, you can slip under them. You can get around. Like, you don't need to be doing all that. But that shows you how he's got a little bit of a screw loose, but he's a really physical run defender. Like, there was a play where Bijan Robinson literally ran him over in the hole, but you still had to be impressed at the fact that he popped right back up and was willing to put his head down and actually try to take on a guy as big as Bijan Robinson. So it's not like he's necessarily a guy that you can pick on, but there will be 2 or 3 snaps of run defense where you do see somebody get to the second level and he might get embarrassed a little bit, but more often than not, he is solid. Still, I would threaten that. I would try to see if you can get the Patriots to go to their base defense by just running the ball incessantly. And when they dare you to run, saying, okay, we'll do it. And I don't know if they'll be able to have quite as much success as they've had recently. Again, the Patriots played a lot of nickel last time and were able to do a pretty good job against their defense. But even still, I'd like to do that. And once they get into base defense, or if you can get them to base defense, that's where you start potentially being able to attack their linebackers and honestly even the safeties, because Craig Woodson and Jalen Hawkins had some trouble covering these guys last time around. If you're talking about where the Bills should throw in some of the more obvious passing situations, that's where I would target.
And then from an interior defensive perspective, there's a couple questions in the chat about it. Milton Williams is out. He's on injured reserve. Also on the offensive side, Will Campbell is out. He's on injured reserve. For me, is Tonga going to play?
It's looking that way. He was doing some stuff in practice, but we didn't get whether he was limited or not. It looked like he might have been, so still TBD, but he's trending positively, I think.
Okay, fair. He's been a nice little underrated piece. And also even on the offensive side stuff, when they put him in as like a fullback and let him just annihilate dudes on the run.
I don't think they're going to do a lot more of that because the injury, which is really sad.
Sense.
But yeah, dude, he had some pretty impressive natural instincts at fullback.
Yeah, and he was a cool rotational 3, or depending on what they were doing with their fronts, when he's playing alongside or behind Barmore and Williams, who are both monsters. I echo your thoughts here, and I think Carl's head is in the exact right place. And I don't even think it's just from the Pats perspective. I've said it all year, like the Bills, they need to win with the run game and the tight ends. You just got to dance with who brought you, and that's who brought you. Like, you have to win with 12, 13, 21, 22, whatever. Even the ideal, somebody in the chat was like, how about 23 personnel? Yeah, I would put 23 personnel out there, and then I'll put Dalton Kincaid out wide as like a quasi-X and kind of see what you get. I think that's just kind of the baseline for them each week, but especially against the Pats, I want to, depending on how healthy he is, but even with what you can do with Knox a bit, I want Dalton Kincaid matched up on those linebackers and those safeties. Or even if it's, him matched up against Marcus Jones, he's got a significant size advantage, even though Jones can battle. And for those who don't remember, I think Marcus Jones had a nice, bat down or forced incompletion against Keon Coleman in their first matchup. Granted, Keon Coleman isn't necessarily maybe the best, person to throw the ball to.
Drake brought that up actually Marcus Jones gave up 2 touchdowns to Drake London and just not great. Obviously, that's a pretty terrible matchup.
Yeah.
And I brought up was there anything you maybe could have done that's kind of a disadvantageous situation for Marcus? And he pointed out, well, like, hey, we've seen him do it. Like, he broke it up against Keon Coleman. And I remember sitting there like, I know what you mean, but I feel like you also know that's a little disingenuous. Yeah. Those are very different calibers of possession receivers. But yeah, it was kind of funny when that came up, and I was like, yeah, okay, sure, I'll give it.
I get what you're getting at, but also like, no, not really. Don't do that. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, and give me that. Like, on one, I think the Bills need to run the ball like every single week, but especially from a pass perspective, give me Kincaid and the tight ends, running backs too, match up against the spine. Give me the linebackers and the safeties as much in coverage as I can. And that's part of the Bills' skill set in what they have in the tight end and running back room. But also, like, I would rather not pass to these receivers against Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis. Like, I just don't want to live there. I think that's, even with Davis being, I think on the downside of his career, is still a pretty good CB2.
He's been good the past 2 weeks, right? Multiple pass breakups 2 weeks in a row.
Like, looking a little more like the gravedigger, like that he was in Tampa Bay. I think the world of Christian Gonzalez, like, I think his ceiling is only, like, his floor is only getting higher. His ceiling is only getting higher. I think his ceiling is to be like a top 5 cover corner, like in this league. I think he's already in that top 10 kind of conversation. So I don't even want to play that game. Like, what the game I do want to play is, hey, I'm going to go heavy and run duo and try and bounce it outside, and I'm going to make Christian Gonzalez go one-on-one with James Cook. Like, that's the kind of game I want to play. I want to play, hey, can these Patriots linebackers cover Dalton Kincaid? Everything you alluded to, kind of what Carl alluded to. So, yeah, I am completely in lockstep with you there, 1,000%. And, getting back to kind of wrap up this segment on the Bills being feared aside from Josh Allen, I always just think it's so interesting because amongst the Bills fan base, the Bills love to pay their own. That's their big thing, draft, develop, re-sign. Like, that's what they want to be and who they want to be. But even for myself, like, let alone like the fan base, I think there is constantly this conversation about this Bills team where it's like, okay, you have Josh Allen, who is like S tier, A tier type of dude, however you want to label it. And then it's like, who else is kind of in that conversation? Do you have anyone else? For a while it was Stephon Diggs, Patriots legend Stephon Diggs, and then they got rid of him. But especially when you're always comparing him against the Chiefs, or when it was the Bengals for a bit, it was the Chiefs. It was like, well, they have Mahomes and Chris Jones and McDuffie. And then it was like, now they have 2 all-pro interior linemen they drafted. And then they signed Joe Tooney. So they've got like 3 all-pros on the interior. They've got 2 all-pros on defense. They've got Mahomes. And then Reed and Spags. But from an on-field perspective, it was all those dudes. And then the Bills, it was like Josh Allen. Or even the Bengals for a bit when they were rolling. It's like, man, like, you've got Burrow and you've got Chase and you've got Higgins and, oh, Jesse Bates is pretty sweet. And then, like, there was a time where Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt were arguably the best linebacker duo in football. And it was like, oh, and then Trey Hendrickson, just using those 2 teams as examples they get compared with so much. And I'm always curious to see from an outside perspective to kind of put it into perspective for Bills fans, whether or not they're too harsh on their own guys. And I think it's very interesting how you framed the defense, like, oh, can they be opportunistic? Like, what are they? And it wasn't, rightly or wrongly, you weren't like, yeah, you got to worry about Greg Rousseau. Maybe if Ed Oliver's healthy, maybe he falls in the conversation for you. Maybe if Terrell Bernard was healthy, who knows? But I think it's very interesting that, from that outsider's perspective, and I think this exists a lot outside of the team, and I think it drives that point home even more for Bills fans and people who watch this team every week, that's another example of, you've got Josh Allen, but rightly or wrongly, you've surrounded him with, I think, good players, but a lot of them are like, B- to B guys, maybe some B pluses. There's that lack of like A plus talent, A tier talent. And I also think it's funny too, even with comparing to the Patriots, kind of a similar conversation right now. I think Christian Gonzalez is the closest guy potentially, but I mean, Milton Williams is a dude. I think Barmore, if he doesn't get knocked off track with the blood clots or whatever the hell he was ascending to like, there's like a million amazing defensive tackles in football, but I was like, Barmore's playing himself into this nasty perspective. Same thing with like Milton Williams, but you've got guys like, okay, are they there? Are they not? Maybe a little more so for the Pats, maybe not. I think this question is always so interesting to pose from an outside perspective because within the fan base, not everyone, most people feel like it's Josh Allen and everyone else. And it's Josh Allen is the front man. And then everybody in the back is like, you don't know who that guy's name is on the CD. Like, that guy always wears the backwards hat so you can identify him because nobody knows who he is. Like, I feel like it feels like that to Bills fans and maybe even outside as well.
It's like they're better than the sum of their parts, which is, I mean, that's what great defenses are. But it's the fact that even when the Patriots, they're known for having defenses like that, where there weren't really many household names, but they had a Stephon Gilmore, or they had an Aqib Talib, or they had a Dante Hightower, where it's like, it's okay to not be a star-studded defense, but you do need like 2 or 3 pillars that you really build everything else around. And then it's like everybody can be complimentary. You can have like a Greg Russo, Caleb on Chase on. I feel like are in similar categories. Is like they're guys who contribute to your wins, but I don't think a lot of teams are going up against them and saying like, woof, we really got to be worried about him. It's like he's probably going to make a play or two, but you're not going to be hearing his name the entire time.
Yes, and in that vein, I think Ben Solak was talking about it in relation to. I saw something today. Jalen Hurts like conversation. It was like Hurts versus Caleb Williams, whatever show he was on. And he was talking about Hurts being a guy like, oh, you can win with, not a guy you win because of. And I think the Bills have a lot of those guys. They have a lot of guys now where it's like, oh yeah, you can win with that guy. Yeah, you can win with that guy. But how many guys do you have that you win because of? Mm-hmm. And they're always comparing, again, use the Chiefs as the example. How many games have they won because of Chris Jones or Trent McDuffie? Like, and it's like the Bills haven't had that type of guy or that type of level.
We talked about that with the playoffs too, where it always feels like they don't have the guy who in the fourth quarter makes that play that when you do go back, if they win, you're saying, hey, that was a game changer. It feels like it's Allen who has to do that constantly. And I cannot for the life of me ever remember one of those kind of game-changing plays from the Bills defense.
Yeah, and, rightly or wrongly or unfairly or not, like, they had that great safety duo in Hyde and Poyer, and they would make plays for you.
Yes.
You had, Trey White was an all-pro, but then he gets hurt in, an important year for you when he tears his ACL against the Saints. Then you bring in Von Miller to be that guy, and he was that guy. He tears his knee before you can really kind of get to that postseason. And then I'll say another person who I think is close. And we got the comment here from Alex saying Joey Bosa's close.
If anyone scares me, it's Bosa and the forced fumbles. That terrifies me.
Bosa has been as advertised. He has been a top 10 edge from a metric standpoint, from a stats perspective, even on tape. Like, he's had some struggles with the run because of how he takes chances and just how the Bills have fit the run schematically and structurally. But he was as advertised. But in typical fashion, he's picked up injuries that aren't debilitating, but he's got a this and he's got a that. And you get to the playoffs or week 16, 17, 18, whatever, and it's like he's a shell of himself. But to his credit, he's been playing with one hand, one wrist. He's still been their best pass rusher. Whether you want to take that as a positive for him or as a negative for the rest of the Bills front or pass rush, to each their own. But I think like Bosa has been as advertised, but unfortunately, he's gotten banged up, and it just feels like
injuries. I feel like the injuries are what keep the Bills from having those guys that scare me. Because every season I feel like when we do our previews, it's if he's available, I'm worried. Von Miller was the exact same conversation where if he's healthy, I am scared. But their best players keep getting hurt.
Especially, yes. And Von was a true bucket getter. But especially if your team is made up of a whole bunch of if your team is basically, we don't have any stars, but everybody is pretty good. You need everybody there because you don't have your true bucket getters who are just like, oh yeah, let's just clear it out and play iso ball and let this guy go to work. You need a good starting 5 to be able to create space and shoot the 3 and move off ball and all that stuff. When you start to get those injuries and now you're putting depth guys in who can still get the job done, but things start to drop a little bit. When you are a sum of the parts, you need all the parts because you don't have that individual who can raise the bar and swing the pendulum like that. And it just seems like year after year they get to the where you got to kind of baptize by fire a little bit, or from the frying pan into the fire type of deal. And it's just like they don't have the guys because they're banged up, and the guys they do have, even when they're healthy, are good. But it's like, how much difference makers are they? Oh, it's on the top of mind of everyone. Some people think, hey, Brandon Beane found guys like Khalil Shakir and Christian Benford on day 3 and they've crushed it. And then other people are like, but Rousseau hasn't been a true one. And Ed Oliver hasn't been a true this. And the misses on early picks and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's always a fun or not conversation, depending on how you look at it and want to, have that conversation. Somewhat of a fun conversation, depending again on how you look at it. And talking about early picks, Mr. Drake Maye for the New England Patriots. I think second now for a lot of folks in MVP odds, maybe behind Matthew Stafford, but a season where you and I talked about it again back when the Bills played the Pats earlier, like just how great of a fit he is in McDaniels' offense. And for me, what he's done within the structure, being on time and being on schedule so much, but then also like, oh, okay, it's 2nd and 11. Okay, let me just go do some Drake May stuff. So much of the first game against the Bills was Drake May doing Drake May stuff. Like, for as much as Josh Allen has done that to teams, it was like the Bills got some karma with what Drake May is doing. Like, he's stiff-arming defensive tackles and got D linemen hanging on him, and he's throwing sidearm and changing arm angles and doing all this crazy stuff. You know, for you, in terms of his arrival, where is Drake May at for you in, I guess, his development timeline? You know, is he on schedule? Is he ahead? Is he way ahead? Is he way, way ahead? You know, and then within that, talk about, you know, McDaniel's influence on him and how important he's been for May's development and where he is right now as a quarterback.
He's way ahead. And that's as someone who thought a lot of him before he was drafted, when he was drafted. Like, I have been a big Drake May guy. And
I remember being on your show and you were like, who's the one person you didn't, because we did the home and home like we always do. Mm-hmm. And you were like, who's the one player you don't want the Bills to get, you know, or the Patriots to get? You were like, oh, is it like Marvin Harrison Jr. falling? I was like, Drake May. I don't want them to get Drake May. Like, don't let them get Drake May. And yeah, I'm right there with you.
And I think we all thought there were going to be areas where he needed to improve. There was the accuracy. There was a tendency to do some silly things.
Yeah.
And just the fact that he had very little experience as a college starter. But, yeah, I mean, well ahead of schedule because, I mean, MVP. No one was predicting he was going to be MVP in year 2. Even me as maybe the most optimistic person. I think the most optimistic person on the Patriots beat. Unfortunately, it's basically my personality trait. But the biggest reason is, there's a lot of reasons, but from a Josh McDaniels perspective, as a schemer and as a play caller and all of these things, he doesn't make things too difficult on Drake. Now, this is a quarterback-friendly offense where there are a lot of responsibilities. So there's answers for everything. Very rarely is Drake going into a play, rarely if ever is he going into a play where there aren't really any good answers, which means you have to set the protection. You have to make sure you know where the rush is coming from, set it right, and then, you know, you have the route adjustments and all those things. And Drake is a very natural thrower. He reads space and leverage so well. I thought that would work very well for him because he doesn't play the way it's done on paper. You know, he wants to be able to exploit the weaknesses that he's presented with. That's what the system's all about. But also you see that like Josh McDaniels will repeat play calls. There was like that stick concept. I think they ran it 2 or 3 times against the Bills. They'll repeat things because they know that against different coverages, they'll do different things. And I think I actually asked Josh about this, or I asked Drake about Josh being willing to do that because it's something you see in college, not so much in the NFL. And he said, well, yeah, I mean, because defenses are going to play it differently, you don't know where I'm going to go with the ball. And that's where when you look at the stat sheet, different guys perform each week. You have different leading receivers. Sometimes there's like a bunch of different guys who just have 40 yards, but half their catches went for conversions. And that's a big reason why. And you look at even the Patriots run rate, they run, I think, a top 10 rate, and the run game isn't very good.
No, imagine if it was with how much they run the ball, to your point. Like, that would be crazy.
It is very frustrating. That might be a later thing. I'm just hoping it gets to a respectable level this season.
Yes.
But
that's what I wanted from the Bills' run defense. I'm like, just don't be terrible. Like, I know you're not going to be amazing. Just be respectable and like average to slightly below. Don't be completely deficient.
Just be okay. But they refuse to put everything on Drake's shoulders. But at the same time, they understand what he is. And when you have, like against the Saints, they have something like a 3rd and 11 situation. He throws across his body or something and completes it. Oh, it's coming back. And then they just decide to do the same thing again. Like, they're very willing to just let him drop back and fire at will. And he's actually paying it off because he's making good decisions. He's being coached well. He knows where his answers are. He knows how to take those kind of selective chances where he's not just going to throw into a bunch of bad windows, but the scheme does a good job giving him shot opportunities. He capitalizes on them. And also, Josh McDaniels, unlike what you saw last year, he gives his tackles and his offensive line help. Where when Drake's taking these deep drops, it's a max protect scheme where you see the running backs chipping on both edges so that you don't have these elite edge rushers going up against tackles like Will Campbell and Vidarian Lowe, who are good, but they're not elite. And you do need to give them a bit of an advantage. So I think the scheme puts Drake and everybody else in a lot of positions to succeed. But I also think the way he's being taught the way he sees the field is a reflection of both his ability to learn and process information and make progress week to week. Like one of the biggest issues he had against the Bills was sometimes I thought he just held on to the ball too long. Like there were times where there were opportunities and he didn't get it out. But you see growth. If there's something he struggles with for a couple games, usually by the third or fourth, you start to see that it's something he has gotten better at. Testament to him, but also a huge testament to the coaching and their ability to allow him to thrive within the system, but also kind of just unleash him when they need to as well.
Yeah, it's just I'm in a similar boat. Like I think he's way ahead. My biggest thing for him, I really did think he was going to be like a good dude in the NFL. My biggest thing was how long would it take him to, similar to kind of Josh Allen, how long would it take him to not do like the wild horse type stuff? How long would it take him to like control his power and play within scheme and structure and then bust it out like when he needed to? And that was my big fear with like them getting McDaniels. From a Bills perspective, I was like, oh, that's a dude who's going to teach you to play on time and how to read and go through your progressions. And then I was like, okay, maybe it'll clash a little bit, but it hasn't. And getting him to, again, like play on time and in rhythm and understand, yeah, we can call this concept, but I know where to put my eyes based on the coverage. I know what to do pre-snap versus post-snap. And I know, okay, I can see the rotation. I see the spin. I see this. I'm going to this guy. I'm going to that guy. And then be able to still have, it's 3rd and 12, 3rd and 13. I can run for it, or I can extend the play and make some ridiculous throw, or it can be 1st and 10 and the blitz is going to get me, but I can let a dude hang on to me and I can spit it out sidearm to Stephon Diggs and, turn it into a 5-yard gain instead of a
7-yard
loss.
Just climb the pocket real quick. I didn't even mention that, but that's kind of one of the biggest areas that he's improved as well, because he doesn't drop his eyes and panic nearly as much as he did as a rookie. He's actually willing to take those quick hitches to get himself a better track and then fire. That's been a huge part of the downfield success as well. And another thing where you can tell he practices it. It literally looks like a drill where just hitch, throw. And the offensive line has given him some beautiful pockets, but he's actually taking advantage of them, which is not something you see from all young quarterbacks. And again, not even something you saw from Drake on a consistent basis.
Yeah. I keep waiting for like the deep ball success to regress to the mean, because I'm like, it has to. Like the odds are it has to. But to your point, like the fundamentals and the technique are just so. You explain, like describing it now, like, and I'm thinking of like the Pats games I've watched, and it's been a bunch of them. Like I'm thinking like someone coming around like the right tackle and ball here, and he just turns to his chest and he steps up and then steps up and launches. And then it's like, oh, that's a great pass. And it just, he continues to do that. And yeah, that was my biggest thing. Like how long would it take him to play within an offense in the NFL? And again, getting a guy like McDaniels, let alone kind of the upgrades and updates that they've done on the offensive side. This is a great comment here from Charles saying, one thing that surprised me was Maye's maturity. He takes sacks at times, but he's not putting the ball in harm's way. Even some of the sacks he takes, he's not like taking the, oh my God, why would you take that sack? It's like, oh, you took a sack and you lost like 1 or 2 yards. It's
he
not
was
like
for a while too. He was like in the middle of the season. That was a big problem that I kept harping on. I'm like, hey, if we're going to compliment Drake when he's doing well, we need to acknowledge where he's struggling so that when he improves, we can give him his flowers. And I was like, he's taking too many 2-yard sacks, running out of bounds when he should throw it away. Again, holding onto the ball when you have Stephon Diggs wide open over the middle, and for some reason you don't decide to throw it. And that's one thing you haven't really seen from him in about a month, where the pressure to sack, I think it's still a little bit deceiving. But like you said, sometimes he's taking sacks and it's smart because there's nothing there. Live to fight another day. And the maturity is something you saw even last year, but this summer with the eye discipline, keeping your eyes downfield and then not putting the ball in harm's way, you saw it. And then he kind of regressed. Obviously, once the live bullets start flying, that's going to happen. But his ability, as I said, to go a few weeks and be like, okay, I can't do this anymore, and actually address it has been wild to watch for a 23-year-old in his second season as a starting quarterback. His first full season, as a starting quarterback.
Yeah, and not a ton of he's not like some 3-year starter at college. And, Carolina's not bad, but it's not like he came from this ultra polished program, even like Mac Brown was a good dude it's just, it's been interesting to see him grow, and we'll continue to see if he continues to grow or not. Final segment here for you, Taylor, and then we'll get you out. Putting, again, within like a Bills lens, but even from a Patriots aspect too, like and everybody's talking about this point, like the AFC this year has kind of been turned on its head. Everyone came into this year and it was like, it's a 3-team race in the AFC. It's the Chiefs and the Bills and the Ravens. We'll see what the Texans can do, or maybe the Bengals. And now we're sitting here and it's like, oh, the 3 teams at the top of the AFC are the, from a record standings perspective, are like the Broncos, the Patriots, and the Jags. And we're sitting here and it's week 15. With how the playoff picture stands today, how do you see things shaking out? Where's your head at? It doesn't have to necessarily be a prediction thing. You can give some if you want, but, kind of just talk about the field and what or who you see as being the most important to deciding the AFC. Do you think there's, some team that kind of holds all the cards and it's just a matter of if the right thing clicks? Do you truly see it as wide open, and could it be anyone? And also, I guess within that, actually, I'll keep this second question after you answer that. The floor is yours.
Well, I think this game is really going to be maybe the biggest thing that decides this conference moving forward, because if first of all, the Broncos are in first place, but they have some pretty tough games coming up where I could very much see their win streak ending at some point. If the Patriots beat the Bills, maybe the Ravens give you some trouble, but there's not really any other games that you think they should lose aside from maybe, if they get things locked up, they put in their backups in the last game of the season or something like that. Now, if the Bills win this game, then you start talking about a potential shakeup just in the division. And obviously then if they continue to improve and maybe that leads to a skid for the Patriots, that could completely change the complexion of things. Then the Broncos are able to potentially hang on to their spot, or I don't know, like I'm not great when it comes to playoff scenarios necessarily, but I do know if the Bills win this game, a lot of things could change in the complexion of the AFC playoff race. So I think this game is going to be the most pivotal. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills, they still have some tough opponents. Eagles aren't really what they were. Actually, no, not a lot of tough opponents, to be honest. They got the Jets, the Browns. It's really the Eagles, and who knows where they are. So, I really do feel like this could be a potential inflection point. And I think if the Patriots are able to sweep the Bills, I think that silences a lot of doubters. And I think, Cam Newton, you got to beat the man to be the man. Saying no, you have to do it twice, but I think while that's a silly argument, I do think it's something, the argument that Cam specifically made was silly because he didn't really do anything to back it. Yeah. But I do think it's a fair sentiment that, okay, maybe you got lucky, right? Maybe that was just early in the season. Obviously the Bills didn't play their best game. They missed out on a lot of opportunities, but 2 times in a row, there's not a lot of excuses you can make. And I think it'll change how teams see the Patriots, but also potentially the Bills in the context of, they really are starting to surge and building their own win streak and potentially making a case to be the Bills team that we expect heading into the playoffs versus Josh Allen and kind of like we talked about his amazing friends.
Within that, do you think what we're seeing right now, is it a blip for 2025, or do you think, kind of similar to the changing of the guard in the AFC's conversation we have, do you think there's starting to be a changing of the guard in the conference? Like, are the Ravens on a downturn? Are the Chiefs on a downturn? Are the Bills on a downturn? Is this like kind of the rise of the Broncos or the Patriots or some other team? Like, are we in the midst of kind of a conference change, or is this more just, some teams are real, some teams are not right now, and it's just how everything shook out this year from injuries and opponents and matchups and all that kind of stuff?
I think we could, because I think that the Ravens have kind of shown that they're contenders, but I feel like there's always an asterisk because I always feel like they're going to screw it up for themselves.
Every year, I said in the Thanksgiving game with all the turnovers at the Bengals, I was like, this is a playoff Ravens performance where they just find a way to 70-yard completion down to the 2, turn it over.
Literally I was explaining to Liz this exact thing where I was like, the Ravens are good, but I swear they always find ways to shoot themselves in the foot in big moments. And Isaiah likely fumbled before he reached the end zone. Literally seconds later, it was insane. So I think the Ravens, we've kind of seen, is Lamar very good? Yes. Do I think they have the full picture, even though, they have some studs on defense and injuries really screwed them, if we're being totally honest.
Yeah.
But I just have never, or it's been a minute since I've seen the Ravens as a team that I would really expect to actually make it to the Super Bowl. The Bills, I don't think are that far. I feel like they're a good offseason away from returning to being a very scary team, but I think it's going to take some really big hits to get there. The Chiefs, however, I think are about to go. I think they're about to have a rough couple years because we've kind of already seen that they didn't quite have the pieces around Mahomes for him to be the superstar that we know he can be. And while I think part of that is on him, and I think he hasn't been. This is a tough conversation to have because I really do think the supporting cast has put him in some really bad spots. But I just feel like with so many of their good players like Travis Kelce, this might be his last season. I just don't know if they're necessarily the cream of the crop in the AFC anymore. And I think it may be a couple of years until they really get to that point, because I think they're really going to need to retool. And I think they're going to have to add some more pieces. And I think the Broncos and Patriots are in positions where they could be good for the foreseeable future. And even, the Chargers and their injuries, man.
Every year, man.
They kind of are like the Ravens, but even worse injury luck, honestly, where it's like they're good. And I respect them, and I think they can, make things interesting, but I don't think they're legitimate contenders. So it's tough because I think this has just been such a weird season, and it's really showing that you need to support your quarterbacks because they cannot, in fact, carry a team. We've really seen that the past few years. But I could see, in the foreseeable future, like even the Colts, if Daniel Jones can come back healthy, like that's a very talented team that I wouldn't be surprised if they start, being perennial contenders. So yeah, I think there could be a changing of the guards, but we shall see.
I sneakily within that, and you kind of alludes to, setting your quarterbacks up. If the Texans can just pour some good resources into the offensive line, I really feel like because that defense isn't going anywhere for the foreseeable future. And I say that defense like Stingley and Lassiter and Anderson and Hunter, and everything kind of goes from there. But you are set up from a contract standpoint, from a youth standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, player standpoint, to be so good on that side of the ball for some years. They'll have to deal with contracts and attrition and to another degree, but if they can just fix the offensive line a little bit, help CJ Stroud, they're a sneaky one for the future. They're a sneaky one for me this year. I think if they can just get halfway decent offensive ball, they're my pick for the AFC. But
that's like the team you don't want to face.
I don't want to face them at all. Like I don't. I know I'm a defensive guy and I may be biased. People might disagree. Defense wins championships, and that defense is crazy good considering how much their offense has sucked this year and not helped them. And that defense just balls out and they're not crazy creative. They just know who they are and they do what they do, and they all play like velociraptors. Or
Jalen Petrie is a living weapon.
Dude, yes, they all play like that though. Like they all play like you owe them rent money, and they're ready to take your head off at any moment. It's nuts. I'm going to talk about them a little more once I send you on your way. I want to be cognizant of your time. I've already kept you longer than I said I would. I apologize. Taylor, you are awesome. Tell people, in case they don't know who you are, what you do, where they can find you. The floor is yours. Do all your stuff, then go take Liz out. Do your thing. I appreciate the hell out of you.
Appreciate you, buddy. You can find me at Twitter at TKyles39, and you can find, really I do mostly video. You can find that over at Patriots Press Pass on YouTube. And every once in a while, I'll write something, and that's going to be over at CLNSmedia.com.
You ask all the right questions. You go about things the right way. You know what you're talking about. You are a true ball knower. Everybody uses that phrase too much, sarcastically or seriously nowadays, but you are sincerely one of the best. You're one of my favorite people. I'll see you tomorrow when you host me and we do some stuff over there on your side of the tracks. And yeah, we'll rock. Enjoy the rest of your night. Have fun. Do your thing. I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you for making the time. You're the best. And I'll see you tomorrow. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, buddy. See you soon. And one of the best audiences out there. Appreciate you all as well. Thank you.
Enjoy your night, man. One of the best, Mr. Taylor Kyles. Wanted to send him on his way and not keep him too long. All right. I wanted to go back. Because we got some good questions. Want to do some engagement pieces here on the show, as we are once do. Didn't do it in the beginning because, again, I want to be cognizant of Taylor's time. And even within that, I went 10 minutes over what I was supposed to do. So wanted to get him out. I love this comment from Charles saying the Texans scheme is line up across your man and take their soul. All jokes aside, like, what you are going to get when you play the Texans defense. Like, and it's not to say that they're bland or vanilla or it's like simple in a negative way. Like, you just know they're like what they're going to do. They're going to play some quarters. They're going to play some cover 3. They're going to play some cover 1. And even like with the quarter stuff, they're locking the backside and man, like, you're going to have to beat Lassiter and Stingley. You're going to have to protect against Anderson and Hunter. And that's the basis. They start right from there. And it's like, good luck. Try and beat those corners and try and block those defensive ends. And then they're getting contributions from, Rankins and Settle and, number 72 on their interior, whose name I can never pronounce, but he's awesome. And I just call him by the number because I don't want to butcher his name. Like, he's a fun rotational dude. And then you've got like Toto and Al Shair at the second level trying to take dudes' heads off. Kalen Bullock They just let him function in coverage and not have to really worry about tackling too much. Like, it's just violence and speed and juice, and they're sound fundamentally, and they know who they are, and they play to their players and their skill sets and build the scheme from there. They're well coached. Like, and being well coached doesn't mean you have to be crazy schematically or creatively. Like, they're just so sound in who they are. And it helps to have, arguably the best defensive end tandem in football and arguably the best corner tandem in football. Derek Stingley is on any given day the best corner in the NFL, depending on how good Pat Surtain plays that day. And for me, I think Kamari Lassiter is the best CB2 in football. I think he's the best run defending corner in all of football. And you can make the case that he's on his way to CB1 territory. And then you got Bullock patrolling on the back end, Jalen Petrie being this weird nickel and what he can do. They're playing with like their fourth or fifth string, like other safety opposite of Bullock, and it hasn't mattered. It's crazy. Connor says Will Anderson feels like the Texans MVP. Could be. Like, he's just such a monster. I think his season and Hunter's seasons are being lost because Myles Garrett's a stud at defensive end and having a record-breaking year potentially. But it's crazy. It's just crazy. I wanted to go back to Bob's question because I thought it was really good. Bob says, first off, Bob, thank you for being here. But Bob says, every team has flaws. In the AFC playoff window, how would you rank each team based on their flaws? Who has the most glaring? Who is the most able to overcome theirs? Oof. That is a loaded question, but I wanted to talk about it to a degree. I am pulling up. I'm going to go in order because I want to pull up the standings as of right now. Where are we? Playoffs. All right. Let us. So the Broncos are the 1 seed as of right now. They are 11-2, just like the Patriots, but they are ahead because they hold the conference tiebreaker with 7 wins in the conference versus the Patriots 6 as of right now. So we'll start. It's hard for me to rank each team based on their flaws. Maybe I'll do that as I go through, though. But if we start with the Broncos, their biggest flaw to me is what kind of Bo Nix do you get? Can he push the ball downfield? Everybody's kind of made it like there's stuff that's there, but he's not taking it. But he can mitigate so much of it because he's insulated in that system. They are able to run the football, and he's athletic and he can move. So, like, their biggest or like most glaring flaw for me is the quarterback spot. And by extension, that pass game, which can be kind of feast or famine. But they have one of the best defenses in football. If not for the Texans, they'd have the best defense in football. They have the reigning defensive player of the year. They have a nasty front. They have good scheme. They have good coaching. They run themselves so well as a unit on that side of the ball, individually and schematically. But I would say it's probably the pass game and Bo Nix in particular. The Pats are sitting there at 2. Their most glaring issue, need, whatever, however you want to label it, is their run game on the offensive side of the ball. It is ugly. It just does not look good. They're not good schematically. They're not good from a metric standpoint. That's kind of scary. That's worrisome. I do think you need to run the football come playoff time. And then defensively, I don't think they're the most athletic defense, and going up against a team who can pass it on them and move them around a bit, I think will be a problem. But with weather and how the conference is shaking out, I don't know how much that's going to come into play. Jacksonville, similar to kind of Denver, but more just what Trevor Lawrence are you getting? Good Trevor Lawrence, bad Trevor Lawrence. I think there are some questions with them from like a health standpoint, what they can be overall. They're just from an inconsistency standpoint. Good Trevor, bad Trevor. Trevor Lawrence can make 2 or 3 throws a game that make your jaw drop and that can only be completed by 2 or 3 other quarterbacks in the league. And then he can make some of the worst decisions you've ever seen in your life, and you just don't understand where he's going from that standpoint. I think Jacoby Myers has done well to stabilize the pass game, and I think he does a lot of the dirty stuff that allows Brian Thomas Jr. to just be Brian Thomas Jr. and lean into what kind of makes him go, which is good for them. Josh Allen has been a monster. I think there will be some questions still on the defense, but not as glaring as up-down Trevor. Because when Trevor Lawrence is bad, he's really bad. But when Trevor Lawrence is good, he's like a top 5 quarterback in the league. I don't want to, boil it down to that too easily, but that's really what it is. The Steelers, their pass game, what can they do with it? We saw it against the Bills. Everything for them is get the ball underneath and get some yak, but it's DK and not much else. And DK's super volatile. Aaron Rodgers isn't the Aaron Rodgers of old. Like, I just have a lot of questions about Pittsburgh in general. How good can their defense really be? They look old and slow at times on both sides of the ball. They're the 4 seed right now. They're probably, to me, the worst team that's in the playoffs right now if the playoffs were to start today. The Chargers are 5th. For me, it's their health. Like, can they continue to stay healthy? And do they lean too much into the Harbaugh style of offense where they just run the ball into oblivion? Also, defensively, they're bad against the run. Like, they do not stop the run well. They are a defense that, you kind of watch them get gashed at times. And from a metric standpoint, they're not too bad against the run, but they'll get gashed. They'll get pushed around a little bit. They're inconsistent in coverage. Like, defensively, they're a problem at times, although they, you wouldn't know that from kind of looking at them from the Philadelphia perspective. But I look at just kind of how they're built offensively, and then defensively to a degree, kind of how consistent can they be? How can they shore up the run? And what do you kind of get from there? The Bills, their biggest issue or biggest flaw, their run defense. It's bad. I think it can 100% hold them back. Will it? We'll see, because the teams that are in the playoffs right now couldn't necessarily threaten them too much with that, unless they play the Colts in the first round. But now without Daniel Jones, that's a huge nightmare. Denver could give them some problems there. Jacksonville could give them some problems there. The Chargers could give them some problems there. We'll see. They're at 6. The Texans are at 7. Their offense as a whole, mainly the offensive line. Can they protect CJ Stroud? Can they get a good enough protection? Can they do enough quick game pieces to kind of let them flow and do enough offensively? I truly think, I mentioned and alluded to it earlier, if the Texans can just score 20 to 25 points a game, they're my pick in the AFC, because their defense matches up against everyone. They're such a nightmare defensively, not just for the Bills, for anybody. The Texans are my pick to come out of the AFC. I think their offense is starting to turn it a little bit. If they can just score 20 to 25 points a game, I don't think anyone's beating them. I don't think they're giving up more than 15 to 20 points per game in any way. Like, you would have to have a great day against them and put up like 20 or 21. So yeah, and that's what the playoff seeding looks like as of right now. The Colts, they're at 8. Their biggest thing is quarterback. The Ravens are at 9. Their biggest thing is injuries. They're just not healthy. Matabike's out for the year. Lamar's playing, but he's not healthy. Like, their biggest thing is injuries, and I don't think they're going to get healthy anytime soon. And also their other flaw is beating themselves, which they seem to do every year, regardless of personnel or team or opponent. They just find ways to kind of beat themselves. Okay. That's my answer. I hope that was sufficient. Hope you like it. Hope you liked it, I should say. James says the newest storybook is the Chiefs somehow make the tournament and we and the Chiefs face off at the Ralph for the AFC title. Dream big. It's the only free entertainment. That's fair. I'm very interested to see what the Bills team does. What this Bills team does down the stretch. I've said it before. I want them to win the AFC East because I want the streak to continue and I don't want anyone else to get it. And I wanted them to have some more home games in the playoffs to close down the stadium. I wanted them to be the 1 seed because I wanted the dream of hosting the AFC Championship, winning it, and going to the Super Bowl, knowing that the last game in this stadium would be an AFC Championship game that sent the Bills to the Super Bowl. But logistically, and more than that, just be the best version of yourselves come end of December, early January. And this game against the Pats is going to be big. The game against the Eagles is going to be big. I'm interested to kind of see who they are, what they are, and I think, like so many of us, can they tweak things enough? Can they improve these things enough? Like, what continues to happen on defense? Someone said earlier in the chat, like, Shaq Thompson has mattered a lot for this defense. He's just so much better for them against the run because of how he plays between the ears, how he sees the game, processes it, but also his size and frame and skill set and traits. Such a good piece. I really don't, now I'm not trying to jinx it, and I'm not going to give predictions because I'm far too superstitious for that. You folks should know that, but I really don't fear the Bills playing any team in the playoffs. Like, I would rather not play Denver because I believe in Sean Payton and I think they have a great defense. And I don't want to play Houston in any way, shape, or form. But other than that, I really I have no problem playing the Pats. I have no problem playing the Jags or the Steelers or the Chargers or the Colts, or I still don't want to play the Ravens, but Ravens or Chiefs, we'll see how it kind of shakes out. Those are the top 10 as of right now. Miami there at 11, but with the same record as the Ravens and Chiefs. But just get into the dance, be the best version of yourself. Don't care. Don't care. Be the best version of yourself. Go after it. Get after it. and see what you get, like what you can do. The Bills have vulnerabilities. The Bills have flaws, just like a multitude of AFC teams do. But again, they don't have to play a team likely like Baltimore, who again, even if they do, they're banged up. But like what they do, well, what kills the Bills, you're not looking at any of these teams and like, oh, which teams run the ball really well here. Jacksonville can run the ball. That's why I mentioned them a bit. Denver can run the ball a little bit. Plus with that Peyton offense kind of getting after you a bit. The Ravens can, in theory. The Chargers can, like, but it's not like, oh my God, they're going to get shredded by these three teams. You don't want to face them. Are there teams that they would rather face? Sure. And absolutely. But there's not really any death sentence opponent for them this year like there have been kind of previously. Joey says a few years back, the Dolphins played great and regressed. What's the difference with this Patriots team? One, for me, I don't think the Dolphins were ever as good as their record indicated. Their high was not sustainable based on how they were built offensively and based on how they were built defensively. And on top of that, too, they had a bunch of injuries. And I also think Mike McDaniel is a much better, I think he's a good offensive mind and a very good play caller and designer. I don't think he's a good head coach. But they've turned it around a bit this year. We'll kind of see what happens. I think the difference between them and the Patriots team is the leadership and kind of stemming from the culture down, as corny as that may be. Like Vrabel has had success in this league. He knows what it takes as a player and as a coach to build a successful team, what good culture looks like, what good coaching, development, drafting, and schematics look like. And Josh McDaniels knows that too on the offensive side of the ball. So I think they have a really good head coach. I think they have a really good offensive coordinator. They've got some talent and they know who they are. I think the bones and the foundation of this Patriots team is better starting from the top down. Not to mention, I think Drake Maye is a better quarterback than Tua was. Tua's limitations were seen right from the jump. Mike McDaniel was able to kind of lean into him and, get him to play on time and kind of take the world by storm. But everybody realized by mid-year of that first year, like, okay, just get him off his first read a little bit, try and make him mobile, go from there. And those are significant hurdles for him to kind of achieve and kind of easy access ones as a defense to put their offense into. I don't think that exists as much with McDaniels' offense and Drake Maye quarterbacking it. So I think the foundation, the basis, the bones, and then the leadership at the top are much different for this Patriots team versus what the Dolphins were when they were kind of peaking a couple years ago, before things kind of fell down and the bottom fell out a little bit. K. Moore says, what's your opinion on the Eagles' struggles offensively? I'll be honest, I haven't watched a ton of Eagles this year. I think one, the changes on the offensive line a little bit. Their O-line was so good for years. And they have a great coach in Jeff Stoutland, and they still do have some good players, but they've been banged up there a little bit. I think it's some of the limitations of Hurts, and I think it's some of the play calling this year and just kind of how they operate. I think they each rotate each week. What's the problem? Hurts has his limitations, but he also has his obvious strengths. Teams also kind of know that, and they're not letting him play to those strengths. And then you add injuries up front, you add new play callers seemingly kind of every year because that offensive coordinator is getting poached and getting moved, and you're changing things, and you're having that brain drain. And I also think too at times, understandable for frustrations for the wide receivers, but there's been times when A.J. Brown hasn't given 100%, and there's disconnects there. I think there's a bunch of little problems all around the offense, and it's not just, one individual blame. I'm excited to dive into their tape more going forward, especially in preparation for the Bills game. But they're a unit I haven't watched a ton of this year, but in the limited tape I've watched of them, that's my thought process at this point. Yeah. The comment is, I still don't understand how Philly has paid all those guys. I don't think anyone does. That's why Howie Roseman always gets the how does he keep trading for these guys? How do they keep signing these guys? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, and Charles says, yeah, in reference to those Miami teams versus this Pats team. Yeah, Maye looks like a mini Josh. Come on now. Nobody was ever looking at Tua like that. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part. Like, everybody knew from the jump. I thought Tua was a good quarterback, but he has limitations. But McDaniel for Miami knew how to tap into that and what they wanted, and got them playing on time. And then they had Hill and Waddle, and their speed made a difference and everything. But they would have injuries. And then again, Tua is what Tua is. It's always been that way. I think McDaniel did a good job getting the best of him, but eventually if you've got significant limitations or hurdles, teams are going to find that out. And the book kind of got out quickly on them. And then you can't really change it because Tua can't change. And then if you have injuries, those things all compound 1,000%. Speaking of things that compound, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, from One Pie Pizza and the holiday season and being able to give back. I've talked about it for the past several weeks. One Pie Pizza, sponsor of the show, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. I don't say that because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I think they are the best pizza in all of Buffalo, New York. But right now, we have the Toys for Tots drive coming from our friends at One Pie Pizza. And I've talked about it before. If you come in, drop a toy off. Every toy gets you a ticket. Ticket gets entered into a raffle. So if you bring 10 toys, you get 10 raffle tickets, so on and so forth. 9 tickets for 9 toys, 2 tickets for 2 toys, so on and so forth. But, bring a new unwrapped toy, drop it in one of their donation boxes. In and of itself, that's awesome. Make a kid's Christmas, make a family's Christmas. I talk about it every year. Christmas is one of my favorite holidays. It is my favorite holiday. I love this time of year, but it's not always great for everyone. So any little bit you can do, and whether you're doing it, dropping off Toys for Tots at One Pie, or you're giving somewhere else, or doing something, any donations, generosity, paying it forward you can do come holiday time is just awesome. So if you have it in your budget or in your heart to do so, I think that's absolutely awesome. But if you need some, added benefit or incentive on top of it, go to One Pie Pizza, get yourself some delicious pizza, some delicious food in general. Everything they make is amazing, from the cup and char pepperoni to the sweet sauce pie to the homemade blue cheese to the catering division they have with different macs and cheeses and chicken and rice dishes. The salads they make, everything is great. But if you go to One Pie, get yourself some pizza or food or whatever. Bring some toys. Again, any new unwrapped toy, drop it into a donation box. For every toy you drop off, you get a raffle ticket entered in to win one of several prizes. Their prizes this year are a James Cook autographed jersey, a Deion Dawkins autographed jersey, a $200 gift card to One Pie, and several $30 gift cards to One Pie Pizza. Get yourself some pizza, treat your taste buds, treat your family, do some good for the community, and the city and people in the holiday times and all that kind of stuff. Again, I love Christmas. Any positivity or kindness that you can do to pay it forward and bring it to people in need is awesome. So get yourself some One Pie Pizza, Toys for Tots, awesome prizes, delicious food, all that kind of stuff. I will be dropping off toys probably next week at some point. I always do it kind of the middle of the month. So maybe I'll see you there if you happen to be there at One Pie Pizza. I'm going to bring up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because we're going to start to wind down. I see a bunch of comments coming in the chat. I want to see, where are we at? Yeah, this comment says, supposedly there's a world where the Bills can host the AFC Championship game against the Texans. How nervous are you going to be that day? 1,000% nervous, super nervous, however you want to verbalize it. The most nervous. I don't want to play the Texans more than anyone in the entire playoffs for the AFC. I don't want to play them. The only teams I would want to play less than them are the Seahawks and the Rams, and both of those teams are in the NFC. I don't want to play the Texans in any way, shape, or form. It's absolutely terrifying. Absolutely, absolutely terrifying. Game plan on defense versus the Patriots. Starts with stopping the run. Patriots can't run the ball. Don't let them run the ball. Like that, it starts there. And that's going to start there most weeks for this Bills defense. The Bills are vulnerable against the run. The Pats are not a good running team. You can't let anybody run on you, but especially a team that's good on the ground. Obviously, it makes things worse, but a team that sucks on the ground and is still finding success, don't let them get ahead of that. So they have to be sound in their gap fits. They have to make tackles. They have to be able to dedicate numbers towards coverage, which they will need. I think you get up and you press and you beat the hell out of the Patriots wide receivers. I don't care who's lined up for them. Get in their kitchen, beat the hell out of them. Beat up Booty, beat up Hollins, beat up Diggs. I'm playing press. I am matching. I am rerouting. I am just getting physical and beating the hell out of their dudes for however long it takes and hoping the wheels fall off at some point. You have to maintain rush lane integrity because Drake Maye is an athlete and can do Drake Maye things. When you get the opportunity to bring him down, you have to bring him down. Same thing from a tackling standpoint overall. Make your tackles, bring dudes down, play press, restrict passing windows. You can't just play match and man the whole time. So mix up your zone coverages, mix them in there. But, I don't want a ton of spot drop because they've been carved up with that before. McDaniel's offense can do that. Drake Maye can do that. I'm trying to restrict airspace. I'm attaching dudes. I'm playing press. I'm disrupting timing. I'm also going to blitz a little bit. Corner blitzes, run studs, cross dog stuff. I'm mugging gaps. and kind of dropping out. I'm playing games. I'm bringing simulated pressures. Play on your front foot as much as humanly possible. And when I say play on the front foot, attack minded. So we're playing press. We're bringing pressure, 5 and 6 man pressures. We're going to play some man. We'll play some match. We're bringing simulated pressures, creepers. We are bringing the fight to them. We're not going to sit back and play static coverages, knowing who we are, what we are, and then adjusting from there. Take the fight to them, play on the front foot, come out, punch them in the mouth week in and week out. That's my game plan going forward, but especially even more so with this dial turned up more against the Pats with who they have from a personnel standpoint and how they operate. Good times. Oh, yeah, good comment. Got to take advantage of Milton Williams and Campbell being out. Very true. Attack their tackles, get some pass rush, attack their protection rules. Hopefully you get some good individual performances from Greg Rousseau. Ideally, it'd be great if he steps up and gets a bunch of pressures and a couple sacks, have him be a game changer for you. But yeah, individually, it's harder to predict than schematic stuff. We'll see what happens regardless of the result. We'll be talking here on the show next week about that game a little bit, about the go forward. I hope you folks enjoyed this episode. Not much of a matchup preview, a little bit, but this high-level discussion on who the Bills are, what the Bills are. Appreciate you tuning in for the different time. If you're watching this because you thought it was at 9 o'clock and you're sitting here now and it's 10:30 or whatever, and you're finishing your episode, I appreciate you. Thank you very much for tuning in. Everybody who joined live, again, thank you very much. I know it was communication the day of. I pivoted because of what Taylor needed to do, so we moved the time up. Wasn't really announced until the day of. So I appreciate everybody who tuned in live. I know this is a bit of a different schedule. To those who are watching or listening post live and who like to normally tune in live, I apologize for the time change. We should be back to our regularly scheduled program next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. But if you're here watching live or watching post live, drop a like on this video. Likes are the lifeblood of these streams. Please, 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 and thank you if you have not already. Drop a like on this video, please. If you are listening on one of the audio platforms or podcasting apps, rate, review, and subscribe. Whether you're watching, listening, whatever have you, tell your family, friends, and loved ones about the show. Word of mouth is tremendously important to myself and the entire brand. If you hated this episode or hate me or hate this channel or the show, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day by making them watch this episode. I appreciate the kind words coming in from myself in the chat. I see them and they mean a lot to me. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Joey. Yeah, I just did the film room with Eric, who just did the Turf to Tape before that with Sal. So it's been 3 shows for the brand in the last 4.5 hours or so. And the last 2, 3.5 hours for me back to back. But yeah, appreciate you folks. Rate, review, subscribe, drop likes, shares, all that stuff. If you had a question that I didn't get to, get at me on Twitter at @pro__ant or Blue Sky @proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. I appreciate the hell out of you folks. Enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy the rest of your week. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. Thank you again to Mr. Taylor Kyles for being awesome. I am going to get some sleep. Thank you very much for the kind words again. I appreciate all you folks. Enjoy the rest of your night. I will see you when I see you. Godspeed, and as always, go Bills.